The red sand stretched endlessly in every direction as Lieutenant Kim Tae pressed the accelerator on his exploration rover. This was supposed to be his easiest assignment yet. Just drive around the desert of Proxima 7, collect some rock samples, and head back to base camp before dinner. The kind of boring routine mission that let him catch up on his favorite podcasts while the vehicle did most of the work. But then the engine started making that awful grinding sound that every driver dreads. The rover coughed once, twice, then died completely. Tae coasted to a stop and immediately knew he was in trouble. 50 kilometers from base camp, in the middle of nowhere, with the twin suns beating down mercilessly. He grabbed his emergency communicator and activated the distress beacon. The small device beeped reassuringly, but Tae knew it would be hours before anyone could reach him. The rescue teams were probably dealing with more important things than one stranded geologist. While waiting, Tae decided to stretch his legs and maybe collect a few samples from the strange crystal formations nearby. At least then this disaster wouldn't be a complete waste of time. The crystals jutted up from the ground like frozen lightning, their surfaces catching the light in ways that made his eyes water. That's when he saw her. At first, Tae thought it was just another crystal formation playing tricks with the light. But as he got closer, he realized it was definitely a person, or at least something shaped like a person. She was lying crumpled against one of the larger crystal spires, completely motionless. Tae's heart started racing. In all his years of planetary exploration, he'd never encountered intelligent alien life. Sure, there were always rumors and classified reports, but nothing concrete. And here was living proof right in front of him. She was clearly not human. Her skin had a pale violet tint that seemed to shimmer in the desert heat. She was smaller than most humans, maybe 5 feet tall, with delicate features that somehow looked both alien and familiar at the same time. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, and sweat covered her entire body. Every training manual Tae had ever read screamed the same thing. Do not make contact with unknown alien species. Call for backup. Establish a perimeter. Wait for the experts. But looking at her lying there, obviously dying from heat and dehydration, all those regulations seemed stupid and cruel. Tae pulled out his water canteen. It was half full, enough to keep him alive until rescue arrived, but not much more. He knelt beside the alien woman and gently lifted her head. Her skin felt hot and dry, like touching sun-baked stone. "Hey," he said softly, not expecting her to understand. "Can you hear me?" He brought the canteen to her lips and let a small amount of water trickle into her mouth. She swallowed reflexively, which was a good sign. Encouraged, Tae gave her a little more water, then broke off a piece of his emergency nutrition bar. The woman's eyes fluttered open, and Tae nearly fell backward in surprise. They were huge, easily twice the size of human eyes, and had an opalescent quality like looking into pearls. They seemed to shift color in the light, going from deep blue to silver to pale green. She tried to speak but only managed a weak whisper in a language unlike anything Tae had ever heard. It sounded musical, almost like singing, with rising and falling tones that seemed to carry meaning beyond just words. The woman struggled to sit up, pointing at herself and repeating a sound that was something like Yuna. At least that's what it sounded like to Tae's ears. She was trying to tell him her name. "Yuna?" Tae repeated, and her pearl-like eyes widened with what might have been surprise or relief. She nodded weakly and placed one hand over her heart, then reached out to touch Tae's chest with surprising gentleness. Even through his environmental suit, he could feel the warmth of her touch. It was like she was saying thank you without words. In the distance, Tae could hear the rumble of approaching engines. His rescue team was finally arriving. But as he looked down at Yuna, still weak and vulnerable, he knew his life had just become infinitely more complicated. The distant hum of engines grew louder until Tae could make out the familiar shape of a rescue shuttle cutting through the desert heat. He waved his arms frantically, still supporting Yuna, who had grown stronger, but remained weak from her ordeal. The shuttle touched down in a cloud of red dust, and pilot Lee Hana jumped out, her helmet already off, and her dark hair whipping in the wind. Hana stopped dead in her tracks when she saw what Tae was holding. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again as she processed the situation. Most people would have started asking a million questions or maybe even panicked, but Hannah had always been practical above everything else. "Well, this is new," she said, simply walking over to help. "Can she walk?" "I think so, but she's still pretty weak," Tay replied, grateful that Hannah wasn't making a big deal out of the situation. "Her name is Yuna, I think." Hannah nodded and gently took Yuna's other arm. The alien woman looked up at her with those incredible pearl-like eyes, and Hannah couldn't help but smile. "Hello, Yuna. I'm Hannah. We're going to get you somewhere safe." Even though Yuna probably didn't understand the words, she seemed to grasp the tone. She nodded weakly and allowed them to help her into the shuttle. As they lifted off, Tay noticed how Yuna's eyes darted around the cabin, taking in every detail. She seemed particularly fascinated by the control panels, watching the blinking lights and digital displays with intense concentration. "She's really studying everything," Hannah observed, glancing back from the pilot's seat. "Look how she's watching the navigation system." Yuna's head was tilted slightly, and her eyes followed the moving patterns on the screens like she was trying to decode them. When Hannah adjusted their flight path, Yuna's gaze immediately shifted to the control stick, then back to the display. It was like watching someone solve a puzzle in real time. The flight back to the research station took 40 minutes, and by the time they landed, Yuna was sitting up straighter and looking much more alert. The water and nutrition bar had obviously helped, but Tay suspected she recovered faster than any human would have in similar circumstances. Commander Park Jin-ho was waiting for them at the landing pad, and his expression was not happy. He was a tall man with graying hair and the kind of stern face that made junior officers nervous. When he saw Tay helping an obviously alien woman out of the shuttle, his jaw tightened. "My office." "Now," he said, in the tone that meant someone was about to get a very unpleasant lecture. Tay found himself sitting across from the commander's desk 20 minutes later, feeling like a student called to the principal's office. Park was pacing back and forth, his hands clasped behind his back in that way that meant he was trying very hard not to shout. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Park said, his voice carefully controlled. "First contact protocols exist for a reason, Lieutenant. We're supposed to observe, document, and report, not bring unknown aliens back to our base." "She was dying, sir," Tay replied. "I couldn't just leave her there." "That's exactly what you should have done." Park stopped pacing and leaned forward on his desk. "Command is going to have both our heads for this. Do you understand that? My career, your career, probably half the people on this station." Before Tay could respond, there was a knock on the door. Dr. Song Mira entered without waiting for permission, which was typical for her. She was the kind of scientist who got so excited about discoveries that she forgot about things like military protocol. "Commander, you need to see this," she said, practically bouncing with excitement. "The preliminary scans are incredible. She's remarkably human-like in terms of basic physiology, but her cellular structure is completely different from anything we've ever seen." Park rubbed his temples like he was getting a headache. "Dr. Song, please tell me you didn't run unauthorized medical tests on an unknown alien species." "Just basic, non-invasive scans," Mira said quickly. "But listen to this, her brain activity patterns suggest intelligence levels that are off the charts, and her cellular regeneration rate is about 3 times faster than human normal. She's not just alien, she's incredibly advanced." As if to prove the doctor's point, there was a soft knock on the door. When Park called out "Enter," Yuna stepped inside. She looked much better now, standing straight and alert. But what shocked everyone was when she opened her mouth and spoke. "Thank you for helping me," she said, in slightly accented but perfectly understandable Korean. "I am grateful for your kindness." The room fell completely silent. It had been less than 8 hours since Tay found her in the desert, barely conscious and speaking in an unknown language. Now she was having a conversation. Park sank into his chair, staring at Yuna with a mixture of amazement and growing dread. "How long have you been listening to us speak?" "Since the flying machine," Yuna replied, gesturing toward the window where the shuttle was visible. "Your language has beautiful patterns, much simpler than it first seemed." Mira was scribbling notes frantically. "Remarkable cognitive adaptation. She learned Korean in hours, not days or weeks. Park looked at Tae with an expression that was hard to read. "Lieutenant, I think we're way beyond worrying about protocol violations now." 3 weeks into Yuna's stay at the research station, everyone had gotten used to seeing her pale violet figure moving through the corridors. What they hadn't gotten used to was how quickly she seemed to understand everything around her. It was like watching someone absorb knowledge through their skin. Engineer Choi Woo-jin discovered this firsthand when he found Yuna standing in front of the main power distribution panel, staring at it with that intense concentration she got. When something caught her interest, the panel was displaying warning messages about efficiency drops in the fusion reactor, problems that had been plaguing the station for months. "It's not working right," Woo-jin explained, more to himself than to her. He'd been trying to solve these power fluctuations since he arrived at the station, and frankly he was running out of ideas. Yuna tilted her head and pointed at one section of the display. "The energy flows fight each other here," she said in her careful, precise way of speaking, "like water trying to flow uphill and downhill at the same time." Woo-jin blinked. That was actually a pretty good way to describe the problem, even if it wasn't technically accurate. "Yeah, something like that. The power distribution keeps creating feedback loops. My people learn to guide energy like guiding water," Yuna said. She gestured with her hands, making flowing motions. Not push, guide. What happened next changed everything. Under Yuna's direction, Woo-jin made a series of small adjustments to the power routing protocols. Nothing dramatic, just subtle changes to how the energy flowed between systems. Within an hour, the efficiency readings jumped by 15%, the best performance the station had seen in years. Word spread quickly through the small community. Yuna wasn't just a fascinating alien visitor anymore. She was genuinely helpful, contributing to their daily operations in ways no one had expected. But it was Tae who spent the most time with her. Since he was the one who found her, Commander Park had made him her unofficial cultural liaison, which basically meant he was responsible for helping her understand human customs and keeping her out of trouble. Not that Yuna caused any trouble. If anything, she was almost too polite, always asking permission before touching anything or going anywhere. It was like she was afraid of making a mistake that might get her kicked out. Their daily routine had settled into something comfortable. Mornings were for practical things. Tae would explain how different systems worked or introduce her to other crew members. Afternoons were often spent in the common areas, where Yuna would watch people interact with the same fascination she'd shown for the shuttle's navigation system. But it was during their evening walks that Tae really got to know her. The station had an observation deck that looked out over the desert where he'd found her, and Yuna loved to stand there as the twin suns set, painting the sky in brilliant orange and purple. "This is what confuses me most about humans," she said, one evening watching a group of off-duty technicians playing cards in the corner of the deck. "Each person decides what to do, by yourself. How do you know if you're making the right choice?" Tae followed her gaze. The card players were laughing and arguing good-naturedly about the game, each one trying to win using their own strategy. "I guess we don't always know," he admitted. "Sometimes we make mistakes." "But you still choose," Yuna said, wonder in her voice, "even knowing you might be wrong." "How do your people make decisions?" Tae asked. Yuna was quiet for a long moment, her pearl-like eyes reflecting the last light of the setting suns. "We think together, like one mind with many bodies. What is best for all is clear, because all minds agree." She paused. "But we have agreed on the same thing for so long, I think we stopped having new thoughts." That explained a lot about why she found human behavior so fascinating. Tae tried to imagine what it would be like to share thoughts with everyone around him, to never have a private moment or personal opinion. The idea was both intriguing and terrifying. "Don't you ever want to think your own thoughts?" he asked. "I do now," Yuna said softly. "Being here, watching humans, I have thoughts that are only mine. It feels..." She searched for the word. "Lonely. But also exciting." As the weeks passed, these conversations became deeper and more personal. Yuna talked about her people's endless wandering through space, searching for something they could no longer even name. Tay shared stories about Earth, about the different cultures and beliefs that somehow coexisted on one planet. But there were moments when sadness would creep into Yuna's voice, especially when she looked up at the stars. One evening, Tay finally asked her about it directly. "You always look sad when you watch the stars. Why?" Yuna was quiet for so long that Tay thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My people have been searching for so long we forgot what we were looking for," she said. "We move from star to star hoping to find purpose, meaning, a reason to continue, but each world is empty of what we need. What do you need?" Yuna turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "I thought I knew. But now, after being here, watching humans live and choose and hope," she trailed off, then shook her head. "I think we lost something important when we became one mind. We lost the ability to want things for ourselves." Tay felt something shift in his chest, a protective instinct he didn't fully understand. "Maybe that's something you could learn here." "Maybe," Yuna said, but her expression remained troubled. "Or maybe it's too late for my people to remember how to be individuals." The conversation stayed with Tay long after they'd returned to their quarters. He was beginning to realize that Yuna's presence at the station might be about more than just first contact or cultural exchange. For her, it might be about discovering who she could be when she wasn't part of a collective mind. And that was both an opportunity and a danger he wasn't sure any of them were prepared for. It was past midnight when Tay heard the soft knock on his door. He'd been lying awake anyway, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the conversation he'd had with Yuna earlier that day. She'd seemed more distant lately, like something was weighing on her mind that she couldn't quite put into words. When he opened the door, Yuna stood in the hallway wearing one of the simple grey jumpsuits the station provided. Her violet skin looked pale in the corridor lighting, and her pearl-like eyes were rimmed with what looked suspiciously like tears. "I couldn't sleep," she said quietly. "Can we talk?" Tay stepped aside to let her in. His quarters were small and basic, just a bed, a desk, and a small chair by the window that looked out over the desert. Yuna went straight to the window and pressed her hand against the glass, staring out at the stars. "I need to tell you something," she said without turning around, "about why I was really in that desert when you found me." Tay settled into the chair, giving her space but staying close enough to listen. He'd suspected there was more to her story than a simple crash landing. "My vessel didn't just crash," Yuna began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was running away from my people when it happened. The ship's systems failed because I was trying to cut the connection to our collective consciousness." She turned to face him, and Tay could see that she was definitely crying now. The tears looked strange on her alien features, but the emotion behind them was unmistakably human. "We don't have individual names the way humans do," she continued. "What you call me, Yuna, that's a sound I chose for myself after I met you. My people would know me as part of the whole, like being one finger on a giant hand." Tay tried to imagine what that would feel like, to never have your own identity separate from everyone else's. "That sounds terrifying." "It was all I knew for centuries," Yuna said. "But when I started exploring alone, spending time away from the others, I began to have thoughts that were only mine, feelings that belonged to me alone. The collective noticed and tried to pull me back into line." She sat down on the edge of his bed, her hands twisted together in her lap. "The day my ship crashed, I was trying to completely sever the connection. I thought if I could get far enough away, I could be free to think my own thoughts. But the process damaged my ship's systems. And that's when I found you," Tay said. Yuna nodded. "When you saved me, when you showed me kindness without knowing anything about me, it was the first time anyone had ever treated me as an individual. Not as part of a collective, not as a representative of my species, just as me." The way she said it broke something in Tay's chest. He'd never thought about how profound that simple act of sharing his water had been for her. "But there's more," Yuna continued, and now her voice was shaking. 3 days after you brought me here, my people found me. Not physically. They can't track me across space, but they reached out with their collective mind and found mine." Tay felt a chill run down his spine. "What did they do?" "They cut me off," Yuna said, fresh tears streaming down her face. Completely. They said I was contaminated by contact with individual consciousness, that I was dangerous to the collective's unity. They severed every connection I had to them. You're exiled. Worse than exiled. To them, I no longer exist. I'm not part of the collective anymore, which means I'm not really alive in any way they recognize. She looked up at him with desperate eyes. Tay, I've learned more about what it means to be alive in these few months with humans than in centuries with my own people. You've shown me what it feels like to want things, to hope for things, to care about someone else's happiness more than my own. Tay reached out and took her hands in his. They were warm and surprisingly soft, and he could feel them trembling. Yuna, you don't have to be afraid. You're safe here. But for how long? She asked. This is a research station. People come and go. What happens when everyone I care about leaves? What happens when you leave? The question hit him harder than he expected. He'd been trying not to think about his eventual reassignment, but military rotations were a fact of life. Sooner or later, he'd be transferred to another posting. We'll figure something out, he said, though he wasn't sure what that would be. Yuna was quiet for a long moment, staring at their joined hands. I know humans think I'm just grateful for being rescued, she said finally. But it's more than that. You and the others here, you're the first real relationships I've ever had. The first time I've felt like I matter as an individual. Tay could hear the fear in her voice, the terror of losing the only connections that made her feel truly alive. He was beginning to understand that for Yuna, their friendship wasn't just important, it was her entire world. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Tay was having breakfast with Wu Jin and a few other crew members when Commander Park appeared in the mess hall doorway, holding a data tablet with an official-looking message displayed on the screen. Lieutenant Kim, Park called out, I need to see you in my office immediately. Tay's stomach dropped. Official messages delivered first thing in the morning usually meant only one thing: transfer orders. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, he was staring at orders assigning him to a deep space exploration mission, leaving in 2 weeks. It was actually a promotion, the kind of assignment that could make his career. Congratulations, Park said, though he didn't look particularly happy. This is a good opportunity for you. Tay nodded absently, his mind already racing ahead to how he was going to tell Yuna. When he left Park's office, she was waiting for him in the corridor. One look at his face told her everything she needed to know. When? She asked, her voice barely audible. 2 weeks. Yuna's face went completely white, and for a moment Tay thought she might collapse. Her breathing became rapid and shallow, and her hands started shaking. Yuna, are you okay? No, she whispered, and then louder, No, no, no. You can't leave. I don't know how to exist without... She couldn't finish the sentence. Tay had seen fear before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just sadness about a friend leaving. This was pure, primal terror. The fear of someone who'd found the only thing that made them feel real and was about to lose it. He reached for her, but she pulled away, backing down the corridor with wild eyes. I won't let this happen, she said, and something in her tone made Tay's blood run cold. I can't. Before he could respond, she turned and ran, leaving him standing alone in the hallway with the terrible realization that he might have just triggered something he didn't understand and couldn't control. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 days after Tay received his transfer orders. He was in the mess hall eating lunch when Communications Officer Nam So-young approached his table with a worried expression on her face. Tay, I need to talk to you about your transfer, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. So-young was normally very efficient and straightforward, the kind of person who handled paperwork without any fuss. But today she looked genuinely concerned. What about it? Tay asked, though he had a sinking feeling he knew where this was going. I've been reviewing the documentation, and there are some irregularities, So-young said, pulling out her tablet. The transfer code doesn't match the standard format, and the authorization signatures look off. I think we should delay your departure until we can verify everything with command. Tay frowned. So-young, I've seen the orders myself. They look fine to me. But what if they're not, she insisted, her voice taking on an almost desperate edge. What if someone made a mistake? You could end up stranded at the wrong station or worse. I really think we should double-check everything. It was a reasonable concern, except that So Young had processed hundreds of transfer orders without ever questioning them before. She was known for being thorough but never paranoid. I'll think about it, Tay said, though he had no intention of delaying his departure over what seemed like unnecessary worry. The next day brought another strange conversation. Chief Engineer Bae Jun-seo cornered Tai in the corridor outside the power distribution center, looking more serious than usual. I need your help with something urgent, Jun-seo said. We're having critical issues with the fusion reactor that I can't solve on my own. Tai raised an eyebrow. Jun-seo was one of the most experienced engineers he'd ever worked with, the kind of person who could fix problems that stumped entire teams. What kind of issues? Power fluctuations, efficiency drops, potential system failures, Jun-seo said. Rapidly. I've been working on it for weeks, but I can't figure out the root cause. You have experience with these systems from your previous posting, right? I really need you to stay and help me solve this before someone else gets hurt. The thing was, Tai did have experience with fusion reactors, but Jun-seo had never asked for his help before. In fact, ever since Yuna had helped optimize the power systems, the reactor had been running better than ever. Tai had seen the efficiency reports himself. Jun-seo, didn't the power systems improve after Yuna made those adjustments? Tai asked. For a moment, Jun-seo looked confused, like he was trying to remember something important. Then his expression cleared and he shook his head. No, those were just temporary fixes. The underlying problems are still there. Trust me, this is serious. By the end of the week, Tai had received similar appeals from half the crew. The station's botanist suddenly needed his help with a critical plant disease that was threatening their food supply. The maintenance chief discovered structural issues that required immediate attention. Even the cook claimed that the food preparation systems were malfunctioning in ways that only Tai could understand. Each conversation followed the same pattern, a sudden, urgent problem that required Tai's specific expertise and a strong insistence that he couldn't possibly leave until it was resolved. The problems all seemed real to the people presenting them, but Tai knew enough about the station's operations to recognize that most of them were either exaggerated or completely fabricated. It was Medical Officer Yoon Da-eun who finally put the pieces together. She approached Tai in the observation deck one evening, looking troubled and slightly confused. Something strange is happening, she said without preamble. I've been monitoring the crew's behavior patterns as part of my routine psychological evaluations, and there's been a significant shift in the past week. What kind of shift? Tai asked, though he suspected he already knew. Everyone's priorities have changed, Da-eun said, consulting her notes. People who were previously focused on their own duties are now obsessed with station problems that require your involvement. It's like their entire sense of what's important has been redirected. She paused, looking directly at him. Tai, every single person who's approached you about staying has shown elevated stress levels when discussing your departure. But here's the weird part. They don't seem to realize their behavior has changed. When I ask them directly, they insist. They're just being thorough or cautious. Tai felt a chill run down his spine. Da-eun, do you think someone could be influencing them somehow? That's what I'm afraid of, she said quietly. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidental. Someone or something is affecting the crew's thinking, making them all want to keep you here. They both knew who the most likely suspect was, but neither wanted to say it out loud. Yuna had demonstrated remarkable abilities with technology and learning, but what if her capabilities extended beyond what they'd observed? That night, Tai made his way to Yuna's quarters. He found her sitting by the small window, staring out at the desert where he'd first found her. Her hands were pressed, flat against the glass, and her shoulders were tense with some kind of internal struggle. "Yuna," he said softly, "we need to talk." She didn't turn around, but he saw her reflection in the glass. Her eyes were wide and frightened, like a child who'd been caught doing something wrong. "I know why you're here," she whispered. "I can. Feel what's happening." "Are you doing this?" Tai asked, keeping his voice gentle but direct. "Are you influencing the crew?" Yuna's reflection showed tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean to," she said, her voice breaking. "When I'm afraid, when I'm desperate, my mind reaches out. It's like screaming, but with thoughts instead of sound." Tay moved closer, though he didn't touch her. "What exactly are you doing to them?" "I'm not controlling them," Yuna said quickly. "I would never do that. But when I'm terrified of losing you, those feelings spread to others. They start to feel like keeping you here is the most important thing in the world, even if they don't understand why." She finally turned to face him, and Tay could see the anguish in her expression. "It's not fair to them, and it's not fair to you, but I can't stop it. Every time I think about you leaving, the fear takes over and my mind just reaches out." "How long has this been happening?" Tay asked. "Since the day you got your transfer orders," Yuna admitted. "I've been trying to control it, but the fear is too strong. I've never had emotions this powerful before. I don't know how to contain them." Tay sat down on her bed, trying to process what she was telling him. "Yuna, you can't keep people here against their will, even if you're not doing it on purpose." "I know," she said miserably, "but I don't know how to let you go. You're the first person who ever made me feel like I existed as an individual. Without you, without the connections I've made here, I'll just be nothing." Looking at her sitting there, torn between her desperate need for connection and her knowledge that what she was doing was wrong, Tay realized they were dealing with something much more complex than simple attachment. Yuna wasn't just afraid of being alone. She was afraid of ceasing to exist in any meaningful way. And that kind of existential terror was apparently powerful enough to influence an entire space station full of people, whether she meant to or not. The next evening, Tay found Yuna in the station's small hydroponics bay, sitting among the growing vegetables and staring at a tomato plant like it held the secrets of the universe. She'd been avoiding him since their conversation about her influence over the crew, and he could see the weight of shame in the way she held herself. "The plants don't judge me," she said without looking up when she heard his footsteps. "They just grow day after day, creating something beautiful from nothing but water and light." Tay sat down beside her on the metal bench, careful not to crowd her. "Yuna, we need to talk about what's really happening here. Not just the crew situation, but everything." She was quiet for a long time, her fingers gently touching the leaves of the tomato plant. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft he had to lean closer to hear her. "I haven't told you the whole truth about my people," she said. "We're not just wanderers, Tay, we're the walking dead." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with a sadness that seemed to fill the entire room. "What do you mean?" Tay asked. Gently, Yuna turned to face him, and he could see centuries of pain reflected in her pearl-like eyes. "My people have been traveling through space for over 3,000 years. We started as explorers, seeking new worlds and new knowledge, but somewhere along the way we lost our purpose." She stood up and began pacing between the plant beds, her hands moving as she talked. "When you live for centuries and think as one, collective mind individual desires fade away. We stopped wanting things for ourselves. We stopped hoping for anything beyond just continuing to exist." "But you're still alive," Tay pointed out. "You're still exploring, still searching. Are we?" Yuna asked, stopping to look at him. "Most of my people have chosen what we call the long sleep. They go into a kind of hibernation, preferring unconsciousness to the endless emptiness of existing without purpose. The few who remain awake only do so out of habit." Tay tried to imagine an entire civilization slowly choosing to fade away. "How many of you are left? Active, maybe a few thousand across all our ships. Sleeping, millions. But even those who sleep are slowly dying. Without the will to live, the body eventually follows the mind." Yuna's voice cracked. "We're a dying race, Tay, not from disease or war, but from despair." She sat back down, closer to him this time. "I was sent to survey this sector for potential habitation, but it was really just busy work. Something to keep the few remaining active minds occupied. We've surveyed thousands of worlds over the centuries, and none of them ever mattered." "But then you found us," Tay said, beginning to understand. "But then I found you," Yuna agreed, and for the first time in days she almost smiled. "When you shared your water with me in that desert, when you chose to save a complete stranger who might have been dangerous, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Individual kindness. Personal choice. The decision to help someone not because the collective demanded it, but because you wanted to. She reached over and took his hand, her violet skin warm against his. Over these weeks, watching humans live and work and argue and laugh, I've learned something incredible. You burn with individual fire, each of you. You create meaning from nothing. You hope for things that might never happen and work toward goals that might take lifetimes to achieve. That doesn't sound so special, Tay said, though he was beginning to understand why it might seem miraculous to someone from a collective consciousness. It's the most special thing in the universe, Yuna said intensely. My people have forgotten how to want anything. We exist, but we don't live. You humans, you live so fully that you make existence itself seem worthwhile. She stood up again, moving to the small window that looked out over the desert. When I realized you were leaving, I panicked. Not just because I would lose you, but because I would lose the only example I had of what it means to truly be alive. Is that why you're influencing the crew? Yuna nodded miserably. I've never had emotions this strong before. The fear, the desperation, the need to hold on to something precious. It's overwhelming. In my people's collective consciousness, strong emotions spread naturally. But here, surrounded by individual minds, my feelings are spilling over in ways I can't control. She turned back to him, tears streaming down her face. I'm not trying to manipulate anyone, Tay. But when I'm terrified of losing the only real connection I've ever had, that terror reaches out and touches everyone around me. They start to feel like keeping you here is the most important thing in the world because that's how I feel. Tay stood up and went to her, this time putting his hands on her shoulders. Yuna, you can't keep people here against their will, even if you don't mean to do it. I know, she whispered. But if you leave, I'll fade, not just emotionally, literally. Without the hope and purpose I've found here, I'll choose the long sleep like so many of my people. And when I do, the chance for my race to learn what you've taught me will die with me. The weight of what she was saying hit Tay like a physical blow. You're saying I'm responsible for your entire species? No, Yuna said quickly. You're not responsible for anything. But you've shown me something that could save my people. The knowledge that existence can have meaning, that individuals can create purpose from nothing but will and hope. If I can bring that back to them, if I can show them what I've learned. Here, she trailed off, looking out at the stars visible through the window. But I can't do it alone. I need to understand more about how humans create meaning, how you maintain hope in the face of uncertainty. I need time to learn, and I need connections to people who can teach me. And you need me to stay, Tay said. I need you to choose, Yuna corrected, just like you chose to save me in the desert. I can't force you to stay, and I shouldn't influence others to keep you here, but I'm asking you, as someone who's learned what it means to hope, to help me save my people from fading into nothing. Looking at her standing there, torn between her desperate need and her growing understanding of human ethics, Tay realized they were facing something much bigger than a simple transfer delay. They were potentially witnessing the last chance for an entire civilization to rediscover the will to live. And somehow, impossibly, that chance seemed to depend on the connections one lonely alien had made with a small group of humans on a research station in the middle of nowhere. The question was, what was he willing to sacrifice to help her save her people? And more importantly, was it even possible for someone to learn hope, or was it something you had to be born with? That night, Tay couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Yuna had told him, about her people slowly choosing to fade away rather than continue existing without purpose. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that what he'd initially seen as manipulation was actually something much more heartbreaking. Yuna wasn't trying to control anyone. She was drowning. For someone who had lived for centuries as part of a collective consciousness, suddenly experiencing individual emotions must be like learning to breathe underwater. The fear, the attachment, the desperate need for connection. These weren't feelings she knew how to contain because she'd never had to contain them before. The next morning, Tay made a decision. Instead of avoiding the crew members who had been affected by Yuna's influence, he sought them out. If they were going to solve this problem, everyone needed to understand what was really happening. He found pilot Lee Hanna in the shuttle bay, running maintenance checks on her aircraft. She looked up when he approached, and for a moment her expression was confused, like she was trying to remember why she'd been so concerned about his transfer. "Hanna, we need to talk," Tay said, "about my transfer orders and about Yuna." "What about them?" she asked, but her tone was different now, less desperate, more like her usual practical self. "Do you remember asking me to delay my departure because of concerns about the paperwork?" Hanna frowned, setting down her diagnostic tools. Yes, I remember being worried about something, but now that you mention it, I can't quite remember what the problem was supposed to be." "That's because there wasn't a real problem," Tay said, gently. "Yuna was unconsciously influencing your thoughts because she's terrified of me leaving." Instead of anger or outrage, Hanna's expression shifted to something like relief. "That actually makes sense," she said. "I've been feeling anxious about your transfer for days, but I couldn't figure out why. It's not like we're particularly close or anything." "Are you upset about being influenced?" Hanna considered this for a moment. "I should be, shouldn't I? But honestly, I feel more sorry for her than anything else. She must be an incredible pain to be affecting people without meaning to." Encouraged by Hanna's understanding, Tay continued his rounds. He found engineer Choi Woo-jin in the power distribution center, staring at the displays with a puzzled expression. "Efficiency readings are perfect," Woo-jin said when Tay approached. "I could have sworn we were having critical problems yesterday, but everything looks fine now." When Tay explained about Yuna's influence, Woo-jin's reaction was similar to Hanna's. "So that's why I kept finding excuses to involve you in system repairs," he said, nodding slowly. "I felt this overwhelming certainty that you were essential to keeping the station running, even though logically I knew that wasn't true." "Are you angry about it?" "With her? No way," Woo-jin said firmly. "Look, I've worked with Yuna for weeks now. She's helped me optimize systems I've been struggling with for months. If she could control people's minds deliberately, don't you think she would have asked for help instead of suffering in silence?" Communications officer Nam So-young had a similar reaction when Tay found her in the comm center. "I kept staring at your transfer orders yesterday, trying to find problems that weren't there," she admitted. "It was like my brain insisted something was wrong, but my eyes couldn't see what it was supposed to be. The weird thing is," she continued, "I actually feel clearer now that you've explained it. Like a fog has lifted from my thoughts." Chief Engineer Bai Jun-seo was the most embarrassed when he realized what had happened. "I actually made up problems with the fusion reactor," he said, shaking his head. "I knew the systems were running fine, but I felt this overwhelming need to create reasons for you to stay. But here's the thing," he added, "working with Yuna has been the highlight of my career. Her understanding of energy systems is decades ahead of anything we've developed. If helping her means dealing with some accidental psychic influence, I'm okay with that." Medical Officer Yoon Da-eun was the most analytical about the situation. "From a psychological perspective, this makes perfect sense," she said, when Tai explained everything. "Yuna is essentially a child when it comes to individual emotions. She's experiencing feelings for the first time that would overwhelm most people, and she has no framework for controlling them. The fact that she's been trying to fight it on her own shows incredible strength of character," Da-eun continued. "Most people would have asked for help long before now." By the end of the day, Tay had talked to everyone who had been affected by Yuna's influence. To his surprise, none of them were angry. If anything, they seemed more concerned about Yuna than about themselves. "She saved us too, you know," Hanna said when they all gathered in the common area that evening. "This assignment was supposed to be punishment duty for all of us. Dead-end posting to a research station in the middle of nowhere. But working with Yuna's technology has advanced our research by decades," Woo-jin added. "The power efficiency improvements alone will revolutionize how we design space stations. And the communication techniques she shared have solved problems we've been working on for years," So-young said. Da-eun nodded. "From a medical perspective, studying her physiology and psychology has given us insights into consciousness that could transform how we understand the human mind." "So what are you saying?" Tai asked. "We're saying that maybe this isn't a problem that needs to be solved," Jun-seo said. "Maybe it's an opportunity that needs to be developed." Hana stood up, her expression determined. I think we should go to Commander Park together, all of us. And instead of reporting this as a first contact violation, we should propose something different. Like what? The first official human-alien cultural exchange program, she said. Yuna needs to learn how to be an individual, and we need to learn from her people's advanced technology and collective consciousness. It's a perfect match. So Young leaned forward excitedly. Think about it. We could be the first humans to establish formal diplomatic relations with an alien species. This could change everything. But what about my transfer orders? Tay asked. Request a delay pending the establishment of the exchange program, Da-Un suggested. If Command understands the potential benefits, they'll approve it in a heartbeat. Wu Jin grinned. Besides, do you really want to leave now? Just when things are getting interesting? Looking around at their faces, Tay realized something important. Yuna's influence hadn't just been about keeping him on the station. It had brought together a group of people who genuinely cared about each other's well-being, who were willing to take risks to help someone in need. Maybe that was the real lesson Yuna needed to learn about humanity. Not just that individuals could create meaning and hope, but that they could choose to support each other in doing so. All right, Tay said, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. Let's go talk to the commander. Commander Park's office had never felt so crowded. Tay stood with the 5 crew members who had been affected by Yuna's influence, while Dr. Song Mira sat at the conference table with stacks of research data spread out in front of her. Park himself looked like a man who had aged 10 years in the past few weeks, constantly running his hands through his graying hair. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Park said, his voice carefully controlled. You're telling me that our alien guest has been unconsciously influencing my crew's behavior, and instead of being concerned about this, you want to reward her with an official cultural exchange program? With respect, sir, Hana said, that's not exactly how we see it. Mira cleared her throat and gestured to her data. Commander, I've been studying Yuna's abilities for weeks now. What we're dealing with isn't mind control or manipulation in any malicious sense. It's more like emotional resonance. Her feelings are so strong that they overflow into the minds of people around her. That doesn't make it less dangerous, Park pointed out. Actually, it makes it incredibly valuable, Mira continued, pulling up a holographic display of brain scans. Yuna's people have developed a form of consciousness that allows them to share thoughts and emotions directly. The applications for medical treatment, psychological therapy, and even basic communication are limitless. She switched to another display showing energy readings. And that's just the beginning. The techniques she's shared with our engineering team have improved our power efficiency by 30%. Her understanding of energy manipulation is centuries ahead of our current technology. Wu Jin stepped forward. Sir, I've been working with Yuna on the power systems, and she's not just sharing random knowledge. She's teaching us principles. That could revolutionize how we approach engineering problems. We're not just getting answers, we're learning entirely new ways to think about energy and matter. But here's the most important part, Mira said, her voice becoming more serious. Yuna's people are dying out, not from disease or war, but from despair. They've lost the will to continue existing as a species. Park frowned. What does that have to do with us? Everything, Tay said. We have something they need, the ability to create individual meaning and purpose, and they have something we need, advanced knowledge and a completely different perspective on consciousness and cooperation. So Young pulled out her communication logs. Sir, I've been analyzing the data Yuna shared about her people's collective consciousness. If we could learn to interface with their communication systems, we could establish the first real diplomatic relationship with an alien species in human history. The potential benefits are enormous, Junseo added, but more than that, we have a chance to help save an entire civilization from extinction. Park was quiet for a long moment, studying the faces around him. And you're all willing to extend your assignments to make this happen? We're not just willing, Da-Un said. We're excited about it. This could be the most important work any of us ever do. What about you, Lieutenant Kim? Park asked, turning to Tay. Are you requesting to stay because you want to or because you feel obligated? Tay had been thinking about this question for days. Sir, When I first found Yuna in the desert, I made a choice to help her because it was the right thing to do. Now I'm making another choice to stay and help establish this program for the same reason. And Yuna's influence over your decision. She's not influencing me anymore, Tay said confidently. Once we understood what was happening and why, she's been working to control it. The choice to stay is entirely mine. Mira nodded. That's actually another important point. As Yuna has learned to understand human concepts of individual choice and consent, her psychic control has improved dramatically. She's not a threat to anyone. She's a student learning how to be an individual for the first time in her life. Park stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the desert where this had all started. Dr. Song, what exactly are you proposing? A formal cultural exchange program, Mira said, standing to join him. Yuna stays here as our first alien cultural liaison, working with a dedicated team to establish communication protocols with her and people. We learn from their advanced technology and collective consciousness techniques, while teaching them about individual purpose and hope. And Lieutenant Kim becomes our first alien cultural specialist, Hana added, someone who understands both human and alien perspectives well enough to facilitate genuine cooperation. Park was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing the unprecedented nature of what they were suggesting. Finally, he turned back to the group. This goes way beyond my authority, he said. We're talking about establishing first contact protocols and diplomatic relationships. I'll need approval from command, probably from the Colonial Council itself. But you'll support the proposal? Tay asked. Park looked around at the eager faces surrounding him, then smiled for the first time in weeks. Lieutenant, 3 months ago I had a crew of misfits on punishment duty, running a routine research station that no one cared about. Now I've got the potential to oversee humanity's first diplomatic contact with an alien species. He moved to his desk and activated his communication console. I'll send the proposal to command immediately. Dr. Song, I want a full report on all potential benefits and risks. Lieutenant Kim, start working on protocols for voluntary cooperation that respect both human and alien autonomy. What about Yuna? So Young asked. Bring her in, Park said. If we're going to do this, she needs to be part of the planning process from the beginning. After all, she's not just our test subject anymore, she's our partner. As the group filed out of Park's office, Tay felt something he hadn't experienced since finding Yuna in the desert, the sense that they were about to embark on something truly historic. Not just first contact, but first friendship between species. And the best part was that everyone involved was choosing to participate freely, driven by genuine curiosity and care for each other rather than fear or obligation. Maybe that was the most human thing of all, the ability to turn a crisis into an opportunity, and to choose hope even when the future was completely uncertain. An hour later, Yuna sat in the conference room with the entire team, her pearl-like eyes wide with amazement, as they explained the proposal. You want to help my people, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, even though I accidentally influenced your thoughts. Especially because of that, Tay said. It showed us how much you care, and how much this means to you. Besides, Wu Jin added with a grin, anyone who can solve engineering problems the way you do is definitely worth keeping around. For the first time since he'd known her, Yuna laughed, a sound like silver bells that filled the room with joy. I choose to stay too, she said, and everyone could hear the wonder in her voice at being able to use those words. I choose to help build this bridge between our peoples. And in that moment, Tay knew they were going to succeed. 6 months after, the cultural exchange program officially began. The long-range sensors picked up something that made everyone on the station hold their breath. 3 massive ships were approaching Proxima 7, unlike anything in human records. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls seeming to shift and flow like liquid metal, and they were heading straight for the research station. Yuna stood in the command center, her face pale with a mixture of hope and terror. They're here, she whispered, staring at the ships on the main display. My people have come for me. Tay moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his support, but not so close as to crowd her. Over the past months, he'd learned to read her moods and respect her need for space when she was processing strong emotions. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. Yuna nodded, though her hands were shaking slightly. "I've been preparing for months, but now that they're actually here." She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders with visible effort. "Yes, I'm ready." Commander Park activated the communication system. "Alien vessels, this is Research Station Proxima 7. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." The response came not through the speakers, but directly into everyone's minds. A sensation like hearing music played inside their skulls. Most of the crew staggered, unprepared for the telepathic contact, but Yuna stepped forward with confidence. "I will translate," she said, her voice taking on a strange, harmonious quality. "They say they have come to retrieve their lost member, who was contaminated by contact with individual consciousness." The mental voice continued, and Yuna's expression grew troubled. "They're confused. They expected to find me broken, diminished by isolation from the collective, but they can sense that I'm stronger than when I left." "Tell them we're not holding you prisoner," Tay said. "Tell them you chose to stay." Yuna closed her eyes and seemed to project her thoughts outward. The response was immediate and overwhelming. A wave of disbelief and concern that washed over everyone in the command center. "They don't understand the concept of choice in this context," Yuna explained. "To them, choosing to remain separated from the collective is like choosing to cut off your own limbs." Dr. Song Mira stepped forward. "Ask them if they'd be willing to send a small delegation to observe our interactions. Let them see how the cultural exchange program works." After another moment of mental communication, Yuna smiled for the first time since the ships had appeared. "They're curious. 3 representatives will come aboard, but they want assurances that they won't be contaminated by individual consciousness. Tell them that exposure to individual thinking is voluntary," Commander Park said. "They can observe without participating." An hour later, 3 figures materialized in the station's main docking bay in a display of technology that left even Wu Jin speechless. They looked similar to Yuna, but seemed somehow less solid, as if they were not quite fully present in their individual bodies. The lead figure, Yuna indicated that their name translated roughly to harmony of purpose, looked around the docking bay with eyes that seemed to see everything and nothing at once. "They're struggling to process individual perspectives," Yuna explained as she guided the delegation through the station. "Imagine trying to see through one eye when you've always seen through 1,000. The real breakthrough came when they reached the common area, where the human crew was going about their normal evening routines. Hana was reading a book. Wu Jin was playing chess with Jun Seo. So Young was video calling her family on Earth, and Da-eun was working on a personal art project. The alien delegation stopped, their unified attention focusing on the scene with intense interest. "What confuses them?" Tai asked. Yuna listened to their mental communication, then smiled. "They want to know why everyone is doing different things. In their society, during rest periods, everyone would be engaged in the same harmonious activity. Explain to them that humans find joy in pursuing individual interests," Mira suggested. As Yuna translated, the delegation's attention became even more focused. One of them, who Yuna called Seeker of Patterns, stepped closer to watch Wu Jin and Jun Seo's chess game. "They're fascinated by competition," Yuna reported. "The idea that 2 individuals would voluntarily challenge each other for the pleasure of the struggle is completely foreign to them." Over the next several days, the delegation observed every aspect of station life. They watched crew members make personal decisions, pursue individual goals, and most importantly, choose to help each other without being compelled by collective consciousness. The turning point came when So Young received news that her father on Earth was seriously ill. The delegation watched in amazement as the entire crew rallied around her, offering emotional support and practical help without any central authority directing their actions. "This is what I tried to explain," Yuna told her people, her voice filled with emotion. "Humans don't help each other because they have to. They help because they choose to. Each person burns with their own individual star, but they choose to shine their light on others." Seeker of Patterns approached Tai directly, speaking in halting but understandable words. "You choose to care for Yuna, not commanded. Choose. That's Right, Tay said. We all chose to help her because we wanted to, not because anyone told us to. The delegation spent long hours in mental communion with each other and with Una, processing what they had observed. Finally, Harmony of Purpose made an announcement that changed everything. Some of us wish to learn this, choosing, Una. Translated, her voice shaking with excitement. They want to volunteer for the exchange program. 3 members of Una's people chose to remain at the station, beginning their own journey toward individual consciousness. It was terrifying for them at first, like learning to walk without the support of the collective mind, but they were fascinated by the possibilities. Meanwhile, the rest of the delegation returned to their ships, carrying with them something unprecedented, individual experiences and perspectives that they had chosen to acquire. What happens now? Tay asked Una, as they watched the alien ships prepare to depart. They'll share what they learned with the collective, she said. Not as commands or directives, but as options. Some will choose to continue the long sleep, but others might choose to wake up and explore these new possibilities. Months later, more ships began arriving. Not invasion fleets or rescue missions, but small groups of Una's people who had chosen to learn about individual consciousness and personal choice. The research station transformed into something unprecedented in human history, a genuine meeting place between species where beings, from 2 completely different ways of existing, could learn from each other as equals. Do you ever regret your choice to stay? Tay asked Una one evening, as they watched another group of her people practicing the art of making individual decisions. Una smiled, her pearl-like eyes reflecting the lights of both human and alien technology working in harmony. I've learned. That regret requires looking back at paths not taken, but I'm too busy looking forward at all the paths still available to choose. She gestured toward the mixed groups of humans and aliens working together throughout the station. My people are learning to hope again, one individual choice at a time. And humans are learning new ways to think and connect. We're all becoming something new together. And that's worth everything? That's worth everything, Una confirmed, because now we all know that no matter how dark things get, there's always another choice waiting to be made. And sometimes, the choice to reach out to someone different from yourself is the one that saves everyone. Looking around at the bustling station with its mixture of species and perspectives all working together by choice rather than compulsion, Tay knew she was right. They hadn't just saved Una or her people, they had all saved each other, one decision at a time. And the best part was that it was only the beginning. 8 months had passed since the cultural exchange program began and life on Research Station. Proxima 7 had settled into a rhythm that no one could have imagined when Tay first found Una collapsed in the desert. The station buzzed with activity as humans and the 3 volunteer aliens worked side by side, learning from each other in ways that amazed everyone involved. Then the sensors detected them. Massive ships approaching from deep space, moving with the eerie synchronization that marked Una's people. The entire station went quiet as the vessels appeared on the main display, their flowing, organic-looking hulls catching the light of the twin suns. Una stood frozen in the command center, her violet skin pale with emotion. For months she had been preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, the weight of it seemed almost too much to bear. How many ships? She asked quietly. 7, reported So Young from her communications station. All of them are much, larger than anything we've seen before. Tay moved to stand beside Una, offering silent support. Are you ready for this? Una took a deep breath and nodded. They've come to take me home. The collective has decided I've been contaminated too long. But you're not going, Tay said firmly. You chose to stay here. They don't understand choice the way you do, Una replied. To them, my separation from the collective is like a sickness. That needs to be cured. Commander Park opened a communication channel. Alien vessels, this is Research Station Proxima 7. Please state your intentions. The response didn't come through the speakers. Instead, a wave of mental communication washed over everyone in the command center, not words, but pure thoughts, and emotions that felt like being caught in a telepathic storm. Una stepped forward, her eyes taking on the distant look she got when communicating with her people. After a moment, she turned back to the crew with a troubled expression. "They're confused," she said. "They came expecting to find me broken and alone, diminished by isolation, but they can sense that I'm different, stronger. They don't understand how that's possible." "Tell them we're not holding you prisoner," Daun suggested. "Explain that you chose to stay." Yuna closed her eyes and projected her thoughts outward. The mental response was immediate and overwhelming, a mixture of disbelief, concern, and something that might have been fear. "The concept of individual choice terrifies them," Yuna explained. "To choose separation from the collective is unthinkable. It's like choosing to stop breathing." Dr. Song-Mi-Ra stepped forward. "Ask them if they would send representatives to observe our daily interactions. Let them see how the exchange program works." After another burst of mental communication, Yuna's expression brightened slightly. "They're curious, but also frightened. 3 delegates will come aboard, but they want guarantees that they won't be infected by individual consciousness." "Tell them that individual thinking can't be forced on anyone," Park assured her. "It has to be chosen freely." 2 hours later, 3 figures materialized in the docking bay, using technology that seemed to bend space itself. They looked like Yuna, but somehow less present, as if they were viewing the world through a shared lens rather than their own eyes. The lead delegate, whose name Yuna translated as Unity of Mind, moved with the fluid coordination of someone who had never needed to make an independent decision. Their gaze swept over the assembled humans with a mixture of fascination and concern. "They're struggling to process individual perspectives," Yuna explained as she guided the delegation through the station. "Imagine trying to hear a single voice when you've only ever heard a choir." The real revelation came when they reached the common area during the evening recreation period. Hana was teaching Wu Jin how to play guitar. Jun Seo was video calling his children on Earth. So Young was working on a personal writing project, and the 3 volunteer aliens were each engaged in different activities. One learning to paint, another trying to understand human poetry, and the third practicing making personal decisions about simple things like what to eat. The delegation stopped as if they'd hit a wall, their unified attention focusing on the scene with intense bewilderment. "What's wrong?" Tay asked. Yuna listened to their mental chatter, then smiled. "They want to know why everyone is doing different things. In their society, recreation time means everyone participates in the same harmonious activity. The idea of pursuing individual interests is completely foreign. Show them how humans find joy in personal expression," Mira suggested. As Yuna translated, one of the delegates, seeker of understanding, moved closer to watch Hana's guitar lesson. Their eyes widened as they observed Hana, patiently correcting Wu Jin's finger placement, both of them laughing when he hit a wrong note. "They're amazed by the concept of learning through failure," Yuna reported. "In the collective, knowledge is shared instantly. The idea that someone would struggle to master a skill, fail repeatedly, and find joy in the process is revolutionary to them." Over the following days, the delegates observed every aspect of station life with growing fascination. They watched crew members make personal choices about everything from meals to work assignments. They saw people disagree, argue, and then choose to cooperate anyway. Most importantly, they witnessed acts of selfless kindness that came from individual decision rather than collective mandate. The breakthrough moment came when engineer Bei Jun Seo injured his hand during routine maintenance. The delegates watched in amazement as everyone on the station, humans and aliens alike, immediately stopped what they were doing to help him, not because anyone ordered them to, but because they cared about his well-being. "This is what I've been trying to explain," Yuna told her people, her voice filled with emotion. "Humans don't help each other because the collective demands it. They help because they choose to. Each person burns with their own individual star, but they choose to share their light with others." Unity of Mind approached Tay directly, speaking in carefully formed words. "Not protect Yuna, not commanded to protect, choose to protect." "That's right," Tay confirmed. "We all chose to help her because we wanted to, not because anyone forced us to." The delegates spent long hours in mental communion, processing what they had witnessed. Finally, Unity of Mind made an announcement that sent ripples of excitement through the station. Some wished to experience. Choosing, Yuna translated, her voice shaking with joy. 5 members of the delegation want to volunteer for the exchange program. It was a historic moment. For the first time in millennia, members of Yuna's collective were voluntarily choosing to separate from the group mind to explore individual consciousness. The process was terrifying for them at first. Like babies learning to walk, they stumbled through their first independent thoughts and decisions. But with patient guidance from the humans and encouragement from Yuna, they began to discover the strange joy of being responsible for their own choices. Meanwhile, the remaining delegates returned to their ships, carrying something unprecedented. Back to the collective, individual experiences and personal insights that they had chosen to acquire. What happens now? Tay asked Yuna, as they watched the alien ships prepare for departure. They'll share what they learned with the collective consciousness, she said, her eyes bright with hope. Not as commands or directives, but as possibilities. Some will choose to continue the long sleep, but others might choose to wake up and explore what individual existence could offer. And your people who stayed here? Yuna looked over at the 5 new volunteers who were clustered around Da-Un as she explained the concept of personal preferences in food choices. One of them had just tasted chocolate for the first time and was staring at the candy bar like it contained the secrets of the universe. They're learning that existence can be about more than just continuing, she said softly. They're discovering what it means to want things, to hope for things, to choose their own path through life. 3 months later, the sensors detected more ships approaching. Smaller groups this time, filled with volunteers who had heard about the exchange program and chosen to experience individual consciousness for themselves. The research station expanded, becoming humanity's first embassy to an alien species. Humans and Yuna's people worked together as equals, each group learning from the other's strengths while maintaining their own unique perspectives. Do you ever miss the collective? Tay asked Yuna one evening, as they watched a mixed group of humans and aliens collaborating on a new energy project. Yuna considered the question carefully. I miss the certainty sometimes, she admitted, but I've learned that uncertainty is what makes choice meaningful. In the collective, the future was predetermined. Here, every day brings new possibilities that I get to help create. She gestured toward the bustling activity around them. My people are learning to hope again. 1 individual decision at a time, and humans are discovering new ways to think and connect with others. We're all becoming something better together. Was it worth it, everything you gave up? Yuna smiled, her pearl-like eyes reflecting the lights of both human and alien technology working in perfect harmony. I didn't give up anything. I gained everything. I gained the right to choose who I want to be and the chance to help others discover that same freedom. Looking around at the thriving community they had built together, Tay knew she was absolutely right. They had created something unprecedented in the galaxy, a place where 2 completely different species could meet as equals and learn from each other by choice rather than force. And the most beautiful part was that this was only the beginning. Every day brought new volunteers, new discoveries and new possibilities for both species to grow and evolve together. The prison of despair had truly become a doorway to hope, opened by the simple human act of choosing to care about someone different from yourself.